Friends, today's story is sickened me. It destroyed me. So you may wonder, True Red, why on earth are you telling me? Well, I don't actually have a reason on why except to call out these wretched mother for what they are. This is the story of Ivan and Veronica Gonzalez, and this video concerns the death of Genny Rojas, who was 4 years old when she died in July 1995. So, grab yourself a coffee, let's get into it. You see, she and her siblings were removed from her mother's custody in April 1994 because their mother was abusing drugs and neglecting her children. They were placed with their grandmother, Yulisha Ortiz. Pretty sure I butchered that name. While in Ortiz's care, Jenny appeared to the social worker to be happy and well cared for. However, she was a difficult child, fearful and prone to tantrums. Ortiz soon placed Jenny in the care of Ortiz's daughter Anita and her husband Victor Negreto. After 4 months, the Negret family realized that they could not meet Jenny's needs. They returned her to Ortiz toward the end of 1994. And imagine that. Imagine that, being so young and being passed around. I wonder how that must make you feel as a child, if even as a child you're aware of what's going on. In February 1995, Ortiz sent Jenny to live with another daughter, Veronica, and her husband, Ivan Gonzalez. The Gonzalezes had 6 children of their own and lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Chula Vista in California. On the evening of July the 21st, 1995, 2 neighbors were standing outside a window of the Gonzalez's apartment. They heard a loud bang or a thud as if something had hit a wall inside the apartment, immediately followed by the sound of a child crying. Ivan came to the window, looked out, and shut the window forcefully. He emerged from the apartment, slammed the door, and walked off toward a nearby liquor store. He appeared to be angry and in a hurry. You see, Ivan, he entered the liquor store around 8:45 p.m., where he was a regular. He asked for and received credit. He purchased some groceries and then left after 10 minutes. Around 9 p.m. that evening, another neighbor by the name of Petty Espinoza heard Veronica Gonzalez screaming for help. Veronica said her niece, Jenny, had been burned in the bathtub. At this point of the story, that does not sound good. Patty came out of her apartment and asked how anyone could be burned in the bathtub, which is a fair question. Veronica asked Patty to come with her and not to call the police. You cheeky bastard, why not? In the Gonzalez's apartment, Patty saw a child lying on the floor. Ivan was nearby. Patty told him that she did not know how to perform CPR, but that her sister, Naomi, did. Patty ran to get Naomi, who also lived in the building, and told the Gonzalezes to call 911. Veronica, however, repeatedly said, "No, don't call the police." What on earth was she hiding, eh? Naomi Espinoza had heard the commotion and came out of her apartment. Upon hearing that a child was not breathing, she saw Ivan carrying a little girl. Naomi, a nurse's assistant, had CPR training. She asked Ivan what happened, and he replied that the child had burned herself in the bathtub. Questioned further by Naomi, Ivan explained that the child did not know how to regulate the water. Huh? Naomi told him to take the child into Patty's apartment. Ivan did so and put her down on the rug. Naomi testified that she knew the child was dead just by looking at her. Nevertheless, she checked for a pulse and attempted CPR. The body was cold and the lips were white. Naomi noticed scars on the body and a bald spot on the head. Shortly after the first police officers arrived, Naomi left the apartment. A 911 call was placed around 9:30 p.m. Sergeant Barry Bennett responded along with other officers. As he approached the apartment, Veronica met him and directed him inside. Bennett found a little girl lying on the floor. Checking her vital signs, he detected no pulse or breathing. He did not attempt CPR. The body was very cold, left and right, indicating to him that the child had been dead for some time. The shirt that she was wearing was dry, as was her skin and her hair. While he was examining the body, Veronica told Bennett that she had put the child in the tub. She ran the water and then she went to the kitchen to cook dinner. In other words, she left the water running. After about 20 minutes, she returned to the bathroom and she found the child under the water. Bennett noted that Ivan sat nearby and described his demeanor as nonchalant. Bennett called in homicide and child abuse investigators. It was obvious to him that the death was not accidental and that the child had been abused. The entire lower part of her body appeared to have been burned, and there was numerous other injuries. Fireman John Miller arrived at the apartment at 9:25 p.m. He too assessed the child and found her cold and without a pulse. He prepared to perform CPR but found the jaw clenched and difficult to move. Miller concluded that rigor mortis had set in. A medical examiner came to the scene around 1 a.m. He performed a preliminary external examination of the victim, who was identified as Genevieve Rojas. He noted a second to third degree burn from her waist to her feet and other burns on her face, arms, and torso. Rigor mortis, which begins to develop within an hour or two of death, was present. An autopsy was then conducted the next morning. Genny was thin and small, but adequately nourished. Her body was covered with injuries. A large burned area on top of Jenny's head had only partially healed. This injury was infected and at least a week old. And the question remained, where are all these injuries coming from? They said it could have been caused by hot liquid, possibly on more than one occasion. The back of the head was also burned. There was hair loss both in the burned area and elsewhere. A similar burn appeared on the back of the neck and shoulder. The skin on Jenny's ears had eroded, exposing the cartilage. Bro, what the fuck did they do? There was also an abrasion at the end of her eyebrows and on the bridge of her nose. These injuries could have been caused by rough fabric tightly bound around her head. There was bruising around both eyes, probably inflicted within a day or two of death. Pinpoint hemorrhages in the right eye were typical of strangulation. The cheekbone, shoulder, and neck were bruised. There were recent burns on both cheeks in a grid pattern matching the grill on a hairdryer found in Gonzalez's apartment. Similar burns appeared on the shoulders and left bicep. Jenny's lip was lacerated and torn away from the gum. Numerous small injuries on her face could have been inflicted with a hairbrush, and she suffered a subdural hematoma, the result of a blow or shaking within a day or two of her death, and an older brain hemorrhage that had been caused by a violent blow. Jenny's neck bore a ligature mark extending upward behind the left ear. This injury was a week or two old. A similar scar ran from her jawbone to the underside of her chin. There was a triangular scar on top of her left shoulder. On her arms were parallel scars typical of the marks left by handcuffs. You see, handcuffs matching the marks on Jenny's arms were recovered from the Gonzalez's apartment. Her arms and wrists also had abrasions, which could have been caused by a binding of a cord. Bruises on the inside of her thighs suggested that she had been grabbed from behind with a great deal of force. Ulcerated areas on both hands in the area of the Achilles tendon were consistent with erosion from binding. They seriously did torture her, didn't they? The most significant injury and the cause of death was the burn on the lower part of Jenny's body. It appeared to be an immersion burn with spared areas behind the knees, in the groin area, and on the buttocks, indicating that Genny had been held down in the fetal position with her arms out of the water inside the tub. Death at that moment would have occurred between 2 or 3 hours. Jenny's thymus gland was atrophied, which was a sign of prolonged stress. I'm not going to lie, I've never heard of a thymus gland. It was clear to the examiner that she had been chronically and repeatedly abused. A pediatric burn expert confirmed that the burn was an immersion injury. He estimated the water temperature at 140 degrees or higher. Jesus. It would have been 7 or 8 inches deep, and Jenny must have been held down firmly, leaning forward a little. The burn injury could have been inflicted in 10 seconds or less. It could not have occurred gradually. With treatment, however, the chance of her survival would have been around 90%. However, within 1 to 4 hours of infliction, Jenny would have gone into shock. Death could occur quite rapidly thereafter in a child of her age. The burn on Jenny's scalp could have been caused by hot water striking the top of her head and flowing onto her neck and shoulders. Now, the expert did not believe it was accidentally inflicted or that it could have been caused by Jenny tipping over a pot of hot water on the stove. Now, the bathtub in the Gonzalez's apartment appeared to be dry, as did the bathroom floor. Human tissue was subsequently found in the tub, and it was consistent with Jenny's DNA and not with Ivan's or Veronica's. It took 15 minutes to fill the tub with hot water. When full, the water was 8.5 inches deep and 140 degrees. At that temperature, it would have taken 6 to 8 seconds to cause the burn on Jenny's lower body. And if you think about it, let's say they kept her in there for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. If it takes 5 to 10 seconds for the burns, imagine being in there for that long. Wow. In one bedroom, the area behind the door was cordoned with a string fastened to the doorknob at one end and to the knob of a nightstand placed against the wall at the other. In this triangular area, there was an indentation in the wallboard 36 inches from the floor. There was bloodstains in this indentation and on the wall around it and below it. A blanket behind the door was stained with matter consistent with Jenny's DNA. The closet in this bedroom yielded a considerable amount of blood-stained evidence. The closet doors were off their tracks and leaned into the closet. A metal hook was fastened to the closet bar mounting bracket. On the floor beneath the hook was a wooden box measuring about 2 feet in all 3 dimensions. A hole in one of the closet doors afforded a view of the hook. On the wall of the closet below the hook and above the bar were many blood stains. Some were created by hair wiping against the wall, others were the result of blood being flung against the wall. There was blood on the closet bar, the hook, and the cloth fastening the hook to the bar. There was a bloody footprint on the wall, but no handprint. There was blood on the edge of the box, and both blood and feces in the box. The interior of the closet door was spattered with blood. The bloodstains were consistent with a scenario in which a bleeding child, Jenny's size, was suspended from the hook in the closet. They basically hung her up like a chicken, rubbing some blood on the surfaces around her and casting some off as she swung back and forth, bracing herself with her feet on the box and the wall. Jenny's DNA was consistent with blood samples taken from the closet. Now, Ivan was interviewed by detectives at 9:45 a.m. on the morning after Jenny's death. A videotape of the interview was played by the jury. He said Jenny had not been toilet trained and that they had problems with her going to the bathroom a lot, in her pants and on the floor. You see, the previous evening, he and Veronica had put Jenny in the bath together and he had set the water on warm. Only they and their children were in the apartment at the time. This is him trying to explain what happened, or in other words, bullshit his way through this story. After 10 minutes or so, Veronica had Ivan check on Jenny, but he was distracted by a loud bang and checked on the other children instead. He went to the store and bought milk, bread, and beer, returning in about 10 minutes. Veronica was making dinner. Now, after around 10 minutes or so, she went to check on Jenny and screamed for Ivan. He found Veronica taking Jenny out of the bathtub. He tried to perform CPR, but it wasn't helping. So Veronica went to get help from Patty next door. Ivan said Jenny had a lot of marks on her body, which he attributed to her habit of peeling and picking at her own skin. The burn on her head had happened when she knocked over a pot of boiling water. They had not gotten a medical card for Jenny from Veronica's mother, so they tried to care for the burn themselves. Or maybe you were trying to hide the burns from the authorities, you morons. Jenny would rub her head against the walls, he claimed. Ivan said that the ligature mark on Jenny's neck was caused by neighbors' kids pulling on a candy necklace. He had not noticed the hairdryer burns on Jenny's face. Ivan admitted that he and Veronica made Jenny sleep in the closet 3 or 4 times, and that in itself, let's forget everything else for 1 minute. Why the fuck would you let a child sleep in the closet, you moron? He also said he put her in the box a couple of times to scare her. Ivan claimed the hook above the box was also meant to scare Jenny, but he denied ever tying her to the hook. The hole in the closet door was used to hold a stick on which they would dry clothing. He said they never handcuffed Jenny, though Veronica tied her hands with cloth once. He insisted that they did not hold Jenny down in the hot water. The jury also watched a videotape of preliminary hearing testimony by Ivan's oldest child, Ivan Jr., who was 8 years old when he testified. He said Jenny did not sleep with the other children, but in his parents' room or in the bathtub. Her hands and feet were tied when she was in the tub. Who ties a child's hands and feet? The children's bedroom had no doorknob, and Ivan Jr. could look through the hole in the door and see into the bathroom. There was a sliding lock on the outside of the bathroom door. On the night Jenny died, Ivan Jr. and the other children were locked in their room. Ivan saw Jenny in the bathtub through the hole in the door. Then he heard her screaming and crying, but he did not look again. He did not see his father pour water in the tub. After his mother screamed, his father came to the door and told the children to stay in their room. His father seemed to have been sad. When Jenny came to live with them, at the beginning, she had all her hair and no marks or bruises on her face, Ivan Jr. said, but she had lost her hair when his mother burned her and pulled out her hair. He saw both his parents pulling her hair out many times. He added that he had watched through the hole in the door on many occasions when his mother and father burned Jenny with hot water in the bathtub. He said they would put her in the tub, they'd fill it with hot water, and then a few of her hairs would come off. He said Jenny would lie down and his father would hold her head down with his mother helping. Hot water would come out of the spout and Jenny would scream and cry. Ivan Jr. never saw her get burned by a pot of hot water on the stove, but he said Jenny would scratch her head on the wall, and when she did, his parents would strike her with a belt. Ivan Jr. went on to say that Jenny was potty trained and did not have accidents going to the bathroom. He saw Jenny in the closet in his parents' room many times with her hands tied. He saw her on the floor of the closet and also in the box. One time, he saw Jenny hanging in the closet in a basket with her hands tied and her feet off the ground. The rest of the children ate in the kitchen, but Jenny ate in the parents' room. Sometimes Ivan Jr. would give Jenny food when she was crying for it. If his parents discovered this, they would abuse him. Once they made him and his siblings throw balls at Jenny. Ivan Jr. would throw it crooked because he did not want to hurt Jenny, so he deliberately threw it so it would not make contact. Ivan Jr. said his mother would usually get what she wanted if his parents disagreed about something. He was afraid of his father, but not of his mother. He thought his mother was afraid of his father, who abused her. However, his mother often told his father what to do, and sometimes he would obey. During the trial, there was further testimony. Juan Lozano, a nephew of Patty and Naomi Espinoza, testified that when Jenny's body was brought into Patty's apartment, he tried to perform CPR before Naomi tried. He had no difficulty moving Jenny's jaw in order to clear an airway. Lozano said Jenny was cold with no pulse or breath. Her hair was damp. A social worker testified that on July the 24th, 1995, shortly after Jenny's death, Ivan Jr. told her that he did not hear Jenny cry, but did hear her say ow, and then his mother had found her in the water. He said he was afraid of his father, but not of his mother. He told the social worker that he did not see anyone strike Jenny and did not think his parents would hurt her. Now, on subsequent meetings before the preliminary hearing, he said nothing about Jenny being abused. He did say that Jenny rarely came out of his parents' bedroom. The rest of the defense case was primarily aimed at establishing that Veronica was the dominant spouse in Ivan's marriage. And it's interesting how when the shit hits the fan and the chips are on the floor, in a case of parents, they'll start blaming each other, pinning it on each other, instead of actually taking responsibility. You see, the owner of a grocery store near the Gonzalez's apartment testified that she saw Ivan in the store on a daily basis and he was quiet and submissive. You know what we call that on the street? A pussy. Veronica, on the other hand, who came in monthly to cash a check, was assertive and outgoing. When Ivan was along, he would stay behind Veronica, watching the children and let her do the talking. Veronica would tell him which brand of cigarettes she would buy for him. Now, Guadalupe Baltazar, who was Ivan's sister, testified that she had seen Jenny at Ivan's apartment twice. The first time, about a month after she had come to live with them, she was playing with the other children and appeared normal. The second time, shortly after the 4th of July, she had a towel wrapped around her head. What were the parents hiding, eh? You see, Balthazar, she knew Jenny had burned her head because Ivan took Jenny to their mother's house a couple of weeks earlier and asked for money to buy ointment. At the Gonzalez apartment, Veronica took the towel off and showed Balthazar the bruises, which had formed a scab on Jenny's head and one on her shoulders. There was no cuts or scars on her face, arms, or legs. The Gonzalezes had lived with Balthazar for a while, and she saw them on social occasions. She never saw Ivan verbally or physically abuse Veronica. But once, as Ivan was working on a car, Veronica angrily slammed the hood on his head. She also pulled some wires out of the car. She yelled at Ivan. He did not respond other than to tell her, knock it off. We move on to Patricia Andrada. She was another sister of Ivan. Testified that Veronica was verbally and physically abusive toward him. Eugene Luna had supervised Ivan when he worked as a garbage truck driver. Luna had socialized with the Gonzalezes and never saw Ivan being physically aggressive with his wife. He had seen Veronica on one occasion even hit Ivan in the mouth with her fist during an argument. His general impression was that Veronica was in charge of the household and made all the decisions. Ivan once told Luna that Ivan Jr. had seen Luna's son kissing Veronica. He asked Luna to talk to his son about this, but the son denied having an affair with Veronica. Wow, cheeky bastard. Ivan seemed nervous and he was embarrassed. Later, Luna's son admitted the affair and said a child had been a result of this. But for some reason, Ivan never mentioned this matter ever again. As I said, pussy. About 6 months later, the Gonzalezes moved and Luna had no further contact with them. The son, Eugene Luna Jr., testified that he had an affair with Veronica for a few months when he was 16 or 17. On one occasion, Ivan had challenged him about the affair and took a swing at him. Luna Jr. swung back, knocked Ivan down, then helped him up. That was the end of the confrontation. The weird thing is, if Veronica was to see this, she would think, I'm cheating on this man with some kid. This kid literally just knocked him on the floor. She probably lost more respect for Ivan. You know what I mean? Veronica became pregnant and named Luna Jr. as the father. Luna Jr. once saw Veronica become angry with Ivan, throw a plate at him, and hit him in the mouth. Another time, after a night of drinking, Veronica had lost her temper when Ivan tried to help her roll up a car window. She cursed at Ivan and kicked the dashboard of the car. Witnesses called the police, who ended up spraying Luna Jr. and Ivan with mace and arresting Veronica. We move on to Lorena Pivler, who knew Ivan because her ex husband was Ivan's best friend. She said Ivan was quiet and shy as a teenager. Lorena became friends with Veronica, and the Gonzalezes lived with the Pivlers for a few months. Veronica picked fights with Ivan, yelling at him on many occasions. She also hit him and scratched him. Ivan tried to protect himself but did not hit back. After one fight, he ran away and climbed a utility pole. The police came to get him down. Lorena saw Veronica as the boss in the relationship, and as crazy as this sounds, Veronica, looking at her man running up some pole, again, she probably thought, you pussy. I'm not taking any sides, I'm just trying to understand the dynamic of the relationship. You get me? As for Frank Pivler, he testified that he and Ivan grew up together. Ivan's parents were not abusive. Ivan was shy and timid around girls. Frank also viewed Veronica as the dominant partner in the Gonzalez's relationship. And everything I told you, Ivan used, or he tried to use, to his advantage in court by saying, hey, she was the abusive one, but none of that is relevant because the victim here is Genny, not you, you muppet. Now, the prosecutor, Martha Haylog, a neighbor of the Gonzalezes in the apartment building where Genny came to live, Haylog had overheard an argument in which Ivan verbally abused Veronica. Veronica's brother-in-law, Victor Negret, testified that Ivan was a jealous and overprotective husband. He and Veronica argued a lot, and on one occasion she asked Negret to come get her because Ivan was abusing her. Negret heard Ivan yell and curse at Veronica many times. He had also seen Ivan yanking one of the Gonzalez's boys by the arm, hitting him with a plastic bat, and kicking another son. Negret once saw Ivan angrily punch out the windows of a car parked near the Gonzalez's apartment. So, as the trial came to a conclusion, the jury found Ivan guilty of murder, and they were unable to reach a penalty verdict, dividing 8-4. The penalty phase was retried before a new jury. The prosecutor relied on evidence of the crime similar to the showing made at the guilt phase. Ivan recapitulated his guilt phase defense and also provided eyewitness testifying to his good behavior in prison. His character when he was growing up, his Catholic upbringing, his children's love for him, and the effort his execution would have on them, his siblings, and his parents. At trial, Ivan made an offer of proof consisting of 4 documents and an expert witness. See, what they had done, they were eligible for the death penalty, but like I said, when the shit hits the fan and the chips fall where they may, that's when they're like, oh, I need to be a good person now. Ivan presented a juvenile court petition from August 1980 stating that Veronica's mother, Yulisha Ortiz, had brought her 16-year-old daughter, Mary, to a sheriff's station and stated that she could not control her. Mary had scratches and bruises on her arms, legs, shoulders, and back, which she said were the result of her mother's abuse with sticks and boards. Mary said the bruises were minor compared to others her mother had inflicted. Ivan also offered reports detailing interviews with a cousin, an uncle, and a friend of Veronica's. The cousin recalled that Ortiz drank heavily and was scary when drunk, starting fights with her husband. Mary was a stubborn and difficult child, while Veronica and Anita were the favored daughters. The cousin was unable to recall specific incidents, but in August 1980, a social worker had noted the cousin's report that Ortiz had abused Mary with a broomstick and then lit a pile of newspapers at Mary's feet, causing Mary to run away. The cousin said that once, when drunk, Ortiz had pulled the girls by their hair and pulled them around the house. Veronica's uncle said that Mary had shown him burns Ortiz inflicted on her. Ortiz yelled and cursed at the girls, but Veronica had been spared to some degree because she was the favorite of Ortiz's husband. Ortiz fought with various family members when drunk. Veronica's friend had heard Veronica and Mary describe their abuse in 1986. Mary remembered that Ortiz would tie them back to back and set their legs on fire. Veronica said she also remembered that when asked if Ortiz had tortured them, the girl said yes. Ivan also proffered the testimony of Dr. Patrice Perez Ars, a neuropsychologist with expertise in the social development of Latino children. At a hearing held under Evidence Code Section 402, Dr. Perez Ars testified that Ivan's family exemplified traditional Mexican American values. Veronica's family did not share these values due to her mother's drunkenness and violence. Her mother had provided a model of poor impulse control and violent reaction to stressful or threatening situations. Those experiences would have influenced Veronica in dealing with her own frustrations as a mother. The same Dr. Perez Ars conceded that Veronica's biological children were all well cared for, but said that Jenny's arrival in the household created stress that caused Veronica to become abusive. Wait, you're blaming Jenny? Come on, mate, you're better than that. Jenny may have become the target of that abuse because she had been imposed on Veronica by her mother, because Veronica and Mary had an adversive relationship, and because, according to Ivan, Veronica suspected him of having an affair with Mary and perhaps of fathering Jenny. That's a lot of bollocks if you ask me. On cross-examination, Perez R. said she had no data on how frequently abused children become abusers themselves, but thought it occurred less than half the time. She also acknowledged that Latino men, like men in general, were more likely to physically abuse their children than Latina women. Don't have a go at me, I'm just quoting what she said. I'm not saying it. Now, the trial court, after extended consideration, decided Ivan had proffered character evidence that was inadmissible under the evidence code. In other words, they told him, bro, you're full of shit. Bounce. The court further ruled that applying this state rule of evidence did not violate Ivan's federal constitutional rights to present a defense, because the evidence of Veronica's childhood abuse, while probative to some degree, was weak and speculative insofar as it reflected on her behavior toward Jenny. So after all that hullabaloo, Veronica and Ivan were sentenced to death in 1998. And what on earth can you say after that? They're just a bunch of fucking idiots. They abused this child because they did not give a shit. They were pissed off at their own lives and they took it out on her. Now, you guys can do me a favor and have a look if these guys are still on death row, but being sentenced to death in 1998 was the only logical and reasonable outcome. Comment, tell me what you think.